Today we're going to be discussing the deportation, the mass deportations pivot, the latest surrender by the Trump administration on deportations. Now, last time we spoke on this issue, this the last video I did, it would have been in the wake of the murder of Alex Pretty and Renee Good by ICE in Minnesota and Minneapolis. And as you know, these were activists that found themselves in altercations with ICE personnel and were subsequently killed about 2 weeks apart in January. And this all took place during the Border Patrol surge in Minnesota that was allegedly meant to combat the fraud, the Somalian fraud that was taking place in Minnesota over decades. After these tragic events took place, ICE commanding officer Greg Bavino was relieved of his duties in Minnesota and sent back to California. He oversaw the surge. It started at the tail end of last year, and I believe he was originally working in California, Southern California, so he returned there. If there's noise, people are cleaning windows. So the ICE drawdown, so Tom Homan, Trump's border czar, and Rodney Scott, the head of Customs and Border Patrol, ended up taking over operations in Minneapolis after Greg Bavino was relieved. And that was a good move by Trump. Anytime that you're using actually experienced personnel to oversee these kinds of operations, it's helpful. I've said that several times. Now, the drawdown would happen on condition that the governor, Mr. Waltz, and local precincts would cooperate with ICE in apprehending illegal aliens that are already in custody. This was a big sticking point. Many of the precincts weren't cooperating with ICE in allowing ICE to detain illegals that were arrested and being released from prison. So the way it would work is that the alien would go to prison, and upon release, they would let him go back into the community. And what Tom Homan has wanted to do is apprehend these people before they're released back into the community so they can be set up for deportation. And this tactic that Homan wanted to use targeted deportations, faced pushback not only from government officials within Minnesota, but also within DHS. Apparently, Rodney Scott and Tom Homan had a lot of run-ins with Corey Lewandowski, Kristi Noem's mistress, and Kristi Noem herself at DHS. So there was a lot of tension there about tactics and this kind of thing. So this drawdown, among many others in various states, was a major setback, of course, for Trump's mass deportation agenda. And as I said in previous videos, this could have been avoided. I'm not going to get into it again, but just briefly, it could have been avoided with a more disciplined administration and DHS, right? We'll get into DHS and Kristi Noem's firing in a moment, but I've always said that the deportations are necessary, but not in the clumsy way the administration has tried to execute them over the past year. Mass deportations, difficult for many people even today to define that, but depending on how you define it, it's really not possible, right? If you have a disciplined administration handling it, you could probably get 4 to 5 million out within Trump's first term. If he threw all of his resources at that problem, and he didn't throw resources at useless wars across the world in the Middle East and in Russia, perhaps we would have the resources and the focus to execute the deportations in an effective way. But that's obviously not the Trump administration's priority, especially when you consider that the drawdowns, and we'll get into some of those specifics in a moment, the drawdowns actually happened just a few weeks before we decided to go to war on Israel's behalf against Iran. So that's the priority apparently for this administration, not the American people and the promise of mass deportations. Now, again, mass deportations was always just a slogan for Trump. He never believed in it, and it was meant to galvanize the nativist sentiment within the right wing. And in every campaign he's ran, he's actually had something like this within his rhetoric. He's had a treat, a menu that every persuasion on the right wing could choose from. The nativists had the mass deportations, the moderates had tax breaks, the neocons had potential for war. So there was always something. And very rarely, with the exception of foreign policy on behalf of Israel, has he delivered, right? Domestic policy, be damned. Foreign policy, if it's on behalf of the Jewish interests within the country and the state of Israel, that's going to get the green light every time. Now, this should disturb any genuine America First voter and make you rethink casting your vote in the midterms for Republicans. I'll leave it at that. Remember, the Republicans we have to remember the dichotomy here. It's that Republicans need immigrants for labor, of course, and Democrats need immigrants for political purposes, for voting purposes. So this is one of the many reasons that I've said in previous videos that mass deportations, even at the numbers that Obama was getting, was never really going to happen. The will isn't there, and I don't think that the American people are very fickle, and they're not too interested in anything that extreme. The slogan is okay with them. It sounds cool, it's extreme, but deep down, most people that are voting on the right wing don't believe in it. So they don't have the stomach for it. The elites especially have zero interest in the cultural and economic integrity of our country. So now after these events, you've got the murder of the activists in Minnesota, the drawdown, and by the way, the work that Homan did with the governor, Mayor Fry in Minneapolis, it was something, that relationship should have been built up before Trump surged any ICE personnel into Minnesota. That relationship could have been built up, and the operation could have went much smoother had the groundwork and the network been laid before they moved all the personnel in. So the drawdown happens after the murder, and later on, and cooperation starts. And then later on, we've got the firing of Kristi Noem, aka Botox Barbie, from the leadership of DHS. That happened on March 5th because of consistent leadership failures and financial malfeasance, honestly. Big thing that's being investigated right now in a bipartisan way is like $220 that she allocated for advertisements featuring her. She said that Trump had given her the approval for these contracts that she signed with these advertisers. He said he didn't. The biggest problem with that is that she tied Trump directly to this huge sum that was paid to these advertising contractors. Trump really doesn't like the idea of having anything to do with that kind of thing, especially when you consider the astronomical amount of taxpayer dollars that it went towards. So she's gone, thankfully. Her and her mistress, Corey Lewandowski, they're gone. He should have been gone because he was a special government worker, and they only have 180 days on the job. He should not have even been there. I think they even cut his badge access after a certain amount of time. But for some reason, the administration, this actually goes back on Trump, he should have ordered her to fire him and get him out of there. So he didn't do that. Now, I, of course, have never liked Kristi Noem for reasons that I'm not going to go over them again. Suffice to say, she's not even from a border state. So I don't even know what the hell she's doing there, which doesn't get much better. The replacement for Kristi Noem is one Mark Wayne Mullen. He's an Oklahoma senator, and I don't have much of an issue with him. He's not from a border state, and he has no kind of border security experience or interaction. Much of what I know about him is actually from a video that I watched where he nearly got into a fight during a Senate hearing with the leader of the Teamsters, which was actually pretty funny. And I think they've made up since then, but it's about as much as I knew about him. And that, of course, he's from my home state. So another candidate that he doesn't live in a border state, doesn't have any experience relative to border security, but he's an interesting choice. I would obviously prefer Rodney Scott, Customs and Border Patrol, or Tom Homan. Between them, they have 60 years of Border Patrol experience. And I know that Donald Trump doesn't like experienced people around him because he's not able to manipulate them as easily. And also, I would argue that he doesn't want them around because they would actually get the mass deportations done. Again, it was under Obama that you saw these 4 million people deported, and that was under Tom Homan's leadership. And the reason I say that Trump fears that they would actually get the job done because of their experience and because of how seriously they take the issue is because Trump is trying to still appease, his Wall Street donors, interests within the Commerce Department that would be affected if you remove massive amounts of people from the economy. He's trying to keep them away from that. That's, again, why he was never serious about the mass deportations. So there was an interesting angle on Mark Mullen, just as an aside. I found this on Breitbart a couple of weeks ago, and the article it was saying that Mullen was doing an interview with Brian Kilmeade. And Brian Kilmeade said, "I want you to hear Representative Mike Lawler, Republican of New York, and he thinks that the border sealed and the controversy on ICE." He thinks with the border sealed and the controversy on ICE, referring to Minneapolis, he thinks something could be done right now. After playing audio of Lawler talking about a path to legal status for some, Kilmeade asked, "How do you feel about that pathway towards talking about something about the 25 million that are here, maybe for a long period of time?" And ultimately, what he's asking him is essentially about an amnesty for people who have been here for a long time. Mullen answered, "Well, zero starter if we're talking about amnesty towards citizenship." Listen carefully. But Mike made it very clear we're not doing that. "I think there would be a conversation that you might have towards like DACA individuals that were brought here under the age of 18 by their parents. Maybe if you want to talk to someone who's been in the country for 10 years or longer. I don't know, there's a conversation that you could have. But all these individuals that flooded over here that we have no idea who they are at all during the Biden administration, absolutely not. I think there's a cutoff. You can't just simply say that's for everybody." Now, again, this tells us that you have somebody who's dovish on immigration in the form of Mark Wayne Mullen. Now, there's a portion of this that I've said before in previous videos that I actually agree with. If certain measures are in place, measures that will never be agreed upon. So he says here that, if they were brought here under the age of 18, or if they had been here for longer than 10 years, then maybe something we could talk about something. And I've said before that that's an important point to make. If you've been here longer than 10, 15, 20, or 10, 15 years, then have a discussion about something on the condition, have a conversation about something like an amnesty on the condition that you put a moratorium on any immigration into the country. And I'm not talking about just, people coming across the board. I'm talking about H-1Bs, Trump's Indians and Asians and all these people. You put a moratorium, a 10-year moratorium on any immigration. And then you start to have the conversation about how can we not necessarily give them citizenship, but, protect their status, get them processed, get them into a system so that we know who's here, get them on a pathway maybe, if set certain standards that they have to meet before they're set on that pathway. Conversation can be had, but that would be the first step. A complete moratorium on any immigration, if you're going to go that route. But, and it makes sense, because if you're just going to say, well, everyone is on the table, and the Republicans have been going on and on over the years about there's 50 million illegals, you're never going to get all of them out. It's more realistic to say, if you have, again, a disciplined administration, to look at it and say, well, let's look at the ones that came in under Biden. The claim is that 10 to 15 million came in under him. Maybe we should try to focus on those, right? Get those people out. They don't have any roots here. Probably many of them have committed some form of crime. But focus on that bunch first, right? You're in over your head as it is. Focus on that bunch first. It would just be more practical. You know what I mean? Because the thing to realize is that this shouldn't just be about numbers. This should be about, there's a part of it that's about numbers, but it's about changing the infrastructure, the laws that are on the books, legislation, so that, removing people would be a little bit easier, but it's about prioritizing. It seems that it would be easier to find people who haven't, well, I guess I probably have it backwards. It's probably easier to find people who have been here for a long time because they've actually set down roots and are contributing. But the bigger point that I'm making is that Mullen seems dovish on this. Again, there's a part of this that's workable, but you're never going to get a moratorium. The Republicans will never do that. Democrats will never do that. But that would be fair to say, close everything off. No one comes in. If you've got students that want to be educated here, let them do it remotely in India. But don't let them do it here. Let them do it in Venezuela. Let them do it in Colombia, wherever they want to go. And I don't know wherever they're coming from, Asia. Find a way for them to do it over there. And if they can do it, if they can make it over here when they're finished with their education, remotely going to school in one of our universities or whatever, then maybe they can come in. Maybe there's a way by then, after 10 years, perhaps we find a way to make it work. But Mullen seems like he's probably going to be a disastrous choice. And if they do float an amnesty without those stipulations that I was just talking about, that you can rest assured that the Republican Party is finished. You've already got the war. Rest assured the party is done after that if they do some kind of amnesty. And I wouldn't put it past Trump. I wouldn't put anything past him when it comes down to it. Because truthfully, he's not like an immigration restrictionist. So there's a reasonable chance this guy sometime down the road will push for an amnesty. So we'll chalk this up. Mass deportation to another administration's lie. Now, I want to tie this all up because we have confirmation that the administration will formally be abandoning the issue of mass deportations. Now, this is important. We look at the movement of the administration over the past year and see that they were never serious about deportations in any large quantities. And then we look at this retreat that happened in Florida this past weekend. It was a House GOP retreat, and they conceded that they need to pivot on immigration before the midterms. Now, in public comments and this is from Axios, it says, quote, in public comments and private meetings at a House GOP retreat, top officials allowed that President Trump's immigration crackdown had hurt the party and that they needed a course correction on the issue. Mike Johnson told Republican lawmakers this week that some immigration enforcement was viewed as overzealous. And you could call it overzealous if you want to, or you could just call it disorganized. The entire effort was just discombobulated. It was sloppy, unconstructive. It was meant to be provocative. It was actually meant to stimulate the outcome that we're seeing right now, honestly. So House Republicans sought to use their annual policy retreat near Miami this week to articulate a legislative agenda that could broadly appeal to voters ahead of midterm elections. The lawmakers at the risk appeal to midterm elections. The lawmakers are at risk of losing and to present an optimistic front as they fight to keep control of Congress. But in the middle of the gathering, Speaker Johnson acknowledged a vulnerability. President Trump's immigration crackdown has alienated voters, and his party is now in need of a reboot on the issue. So they need a course correction. They need a reboot. They need to recalibrate. Johnson said, quote, we've got a little hiccup with some of the Hispanic and Latino voters for certain, because some of the immigration enforcement was viewed to be overzealous. And everybody can describe it differently. But here's the good news. We're in a course correction mode right now. Mr. Johnson continued, we're going to have a new Secretary of Homeland Security. And this kind of all fits in. I said that Markwayne Mullin is likely going to be extraordinarily dovish. He's going to keep the enforcers, the intelligent, genuine individuals that could probably get this done, like Homan. He's going to keep them at arm's length. And he's going to just tamp down on this stuff. You're going to still see a lot of the theatrics. They're going to probably be buying land and building these massive facilities for reasons that we'll get into. But it's going to be calmed down. It was a lie, and it was meant to sucker people into voting. Now, this came hours after top Republican officials advised lawmakers in a private meeting to stay away from discussing mass deportations of undocumented immigrants as they campaigned for re-election. As according to two people who were present, James Blair, who was Mr. Trump's political director in 2024, and is now a deputy chief of staff in the White House, suggested that the lawmakers focus instead on the administration's efforts to deport undocumented immigrants accused of violent crimes. So that was a complete capitulation. We don't have to say it. I've said it before several times, but it's something that you're getting used to. The compulsive dishonesty of the administration is just something that, and the voters are expected to eat it up and just accept it. And they will. They will, just like they've accepted this war. The Republican voters are fickle, and their mind, or many of them have minds like gnats, and it goes from just one topic to the other, and they will not pay attention to this development. They are going to make excuses for the war in Iran, two biggest issues, and they'll continue to highlight all of these obscure things, like all of the corrupt Democrats that have been arrested that were persecuting Trump. Well, actually, that didn't happen either, right? So, but there's still some good things, right? And let's not be completely black-pilled here. So let's put this all in perspective. We had the surge in Minnesota, started at the ending part of last year. The surge in ICE personnel, National Guard in various states, helping with the deportations effort throughout last year. The killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in January, the drawdown that happened in response to that, purges, Kristi Noem and her husband, Corey Lewandowski, and admissions that mass deportations are too politically volatile and explosive and should be pulled completely off the table. And where are we now? We're back to where we started, essentially, but there's one really important difference, and this is how we'll kind of close this up. The infrastructure is still in place. The security infrastructure is still in place. Think of this. DHS was allocated nearly $200 billion from the Big Beautiful Bill last year. Now, this budget would put ICE as the 14th most well-funded military in the world, right next to Ukraine and Israel. $200 billion. ICE and Customs and Border Patrol expanded by 12,000 plus new recruits. Massive holding centers are being erected all over the country, allegedly for immigrants that are going to be deported. I don't know why you need to make that investment if you just need to get them out of the country. But apparently, in Houston, we read that in Texas, there are these huge facilities that the administration is looking to build to hire or to house immigrants. I don't know how long they're going to be there, I guess. So we'll see. It varies. Various states. I know that in Kentucky, I guess they're going to be doing it as well. Various states are looking at, contracts for building these big facilities. Some of them will hold the immigrants. It just depends on their status, the time that they'll be held there. But most importantly, there's this huge advancement, this explosion in surveillance employed by law enforcement, and we'll explore that. And why is that? After hardly even trying, so the administration hardly even tried with these mass deportations, they retreated. But again, the surveillance infrastructure that was employed during these roundups and raids over the past year all remain in place, and it's actually expanding. And we'll get into examples of that in a moment. And I think that this is probably what we need to be focusing on now, the expansion of the security state. So this is some information from a paper called Electronic Frontier Foundation. And it goes on to say, quote, one common surveillance tactic. This is talking about this collection of security infrastructure that has been tied together to assist the deportations, but could easily be used for Americans, and it's already being used employed against Americans. So this is the infrastructure and how it's all sort of come together. One common surveillance tactic of immigration officials is to get physical access to a person's phone, either while the person is detained at a border crossing or while they are under arrest. ICE renewed an $11 million contract with a company called Cellbrite which helps ICE unlock phones and then can take a complete image of all the data on the phone, including apps, location history, photos, etc. Now, the current CEO of this company is Yossi Carmel, and this is a company that's based in Tel Aviv in Israel. And we're using their information, their technology in a way to apprehend illegals. Easily, again, can be transformed. This could easily be used against Americans. That's the whole point that I'm making here. ICE also signed a $3 million contract with Cellbrite's main competitor, Magnet Forensics, makers of Gray Key device for unlocking phones. They have resumed a contract with Paragon, and they make graphite software. Graphite is able to harvest messages from multiple different encrypted chat apps like Signal and WhatsApp. ICE also spent $5 million to acquire at least two location and social media surveillance tools. One's called WebBlock and the other is called Tangles, from a company called Penlink. WebBlock gathers the locations of millions of phones by gathering data from mobile data brokers and linking it together with other information users. Tangles is a social media surveillance tool which combines web scraping with access to social media application programming interfaces. These tools are able to build a dossier on anyone who has a public social media account. Tangles is able to link together a person's posting history, posts and comments containing keywords, location history, tags, etc., and all those familiar, and all of those with their friends and families, photos with their friends and families. Penlink then sells this information to law enforcement, allowing law enforcement to avoid the need for a warrant. This means ICE can look up historic and current locations of many people across the U.S. without ever having to get a warrant, and of course, access a trove of information, personal information on these people as well. They are able to build a dossier on anyone who has a public social media account. ICE has established contracts with other social media scanning and AI companies, analysis companies such as Fivecast for the social media surveillance and AI analysis tool Onyx. Onyx can conduct automated, continuous, and targeted collection of multimedia data from all major news streams, search engines, social media marketplaces, the dark web, etc. They can build what it calls digital footprints from biographical data and curated data sets spanning numerous platforms, and track shifts in sentiment and emotion and identify the level of risk associated with an individual. And you need this to apprehend illegal aliens, don't you? ICE has contracts with multiple automated license plate readers, and that's really nothing new. Companies and is able to follow the driving habits of a large percentage of Americans. ICE is also invested in biometric surveillance tools, such as one called Mobile Fortify, to scan the faces of people they determine if they are here legally. Mobile Fortify checks the pictures it takes against a database of 200 million photos for a match. And of course, last but not least, ICE uses tools to combine and search all this data along with the data on Americans they have acquired from private companies, and then of course you got the IRS, TSA, and other government databases. To search all this data, ICE uses Immigration OS, a system that came from a $30 million contract with Palantir. And we know Palantir links data from different databases like the IRS, immigration records, and private databases, and enables ICE to view all this data about a specific person in one place. Of course, the CEO is a Jewish man named Alex Karp, very pro-Israel nationalist, and his company is the one that's responsible for accumulating and distilling all this data for law enforcement, and has very close ties to the state of Israel. Very problematic. So you could take this information and do what you will with it. If you look at it collectively and you ask yourself, okay, so we've retreated from mass deportations, the immigration program that Trump ostensibly wanted to carry out, yet we still have this growing massive security apparatus that's just, it's still there and nobody's asking questions about it because it's just supposed to be law enforcement tools that are used against illegals. Well, I don't know about that, especially when you couple that with these massive holding places and warehouses that the federal government is looking to build across different states. It can be interesting to see how this will unfold. And I don't think any of these innovations and the way that law enforcement is evolving is for the deportation of immigrants at all. And if we look at a scenario, in recent months, we've seen this upsurge in Islamophobia, right? Many right-wing pundits and networks have just gone all in about Muslims, and they're building mosques, and they have cities in they're building small cities. They're building buildings for themselves. They're trying to close themselves off in enclaves, and they are implementing Sharia law in these places. They're trying to take over, et cetera, et cetera. And all you need really next is some kind of false flag terrorist attack that will galvanize many of these very Americans that eat up this narrative about Muslims and this kind of thing, turning their attention further away from the growing security apparatus that we're seeing. And it makes it that much easier when it comes to when sentiment, public sentiment is like that, for them to adopt or just turn their head the other way these security mechanisms that are just drawing us closer to a police state. They will easily conform, just like they did after 9/11, right? Everyone was so emotional, and they went blindly into a war. They allowed our politicians to blindly take us into a war in Iraq and Afghanistan, just like we're being blindly taken into a war with Iran because of our animosity towards Muslims. But not only that, we had the Patriot Act. Everyone who's watching this probably knows that. And look at what we have right now. It's not called the Patriot Act, but the infrastructure is in place. It's coming together. It's converging at a certain point, all in the name of mass deportations that aren't happening. It's meant for us. Truthfully, all of those things that we just went over that I read, it's meant for us. And most of the Lilliputians out there that are screaming about Muslims, they will accept it, whether they know it or not. They aren't aware of it. It's like they weren't aware of the Patriot Act, but they're blinded by their prejudice against the Muslims. But in any case, no mass deportations. The book is closed on that. And on that note, we will end. And it's been great. Thank you for joining me. And if you like what you've heard and you wish to indicate that, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.